It's static. Oh, you see, I should have said it's electric. Woogie, woogie, woogie. How's it going, everybody? Good to see you. Hey, Steven is here. I don't know Steven, do I? Do I know Steven? Welcome, Steven. Glad to see you. Glad to see everybody, actually, as I look down, here at my iPad, because I forgot to set up for the show notes, because that is one of those things I do. Okay, that's on Do Not Disturb, so that's good. John has done a roll call because John's awesome. Hank, Frank, Stephen, as mentioned on YouTube. Webb, Brian, Bill, Eugene, yes, John, Andrew, Matthew, and Sir Chuck. I like to call him Sir Chucks a lot. I don't even know what that means. I was watching, I think Chuck might have inspired part of today's show, actually. I was watching his Mac Voices update for December of 2020. Chuck's a pro. Chuck is awesome. If you're not following Chuck, you should be. Not too close, though, because, that weirds him out. Right, you want to do a show? Hang on, because I forgot to write an open. Oh, well, that's okay. I think we can do it. I'll wing the open. Frosty UK. That's my DJ name. Steven, a different Steven, not the one we were talking about earlier, says good evening from Frosty UK. And with that, I think we can begin. Almost. Right. Now I think we can begin. The strongest of the FAANGs. It is Wednesday, the 30th of December, 2020, and this is macOS Can Live. I actually forgot what day it was. It's the day before New Year's Eve. It is the penultimate day in 2020. And yet I was like, what is it? It's December 8th? I don't know. Hi, everybody. It's Ken Ray welcoming you into another edition of macOS Ken Live. This thing that we do some afternoons. I don't know if today is going to be the last one of the week or not. And I should know. I should be able to tell you that. We'll probably get together tomorrow. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about the biggest story of 2020 that isn't COVID-19. How would that be? The second half of the show is going to be uncomfortable for me, but hopefully it will be illustrative for everybody else. We'll talk about my business models. And I know what you're thinking. You have business models? Well, not exactly. And that's what we'll talk about. That's the second half of this show. It's actually answering a question that's been brought up a few times. Some by people on Patreon and some by people who I know watch this or listen to this. And so I'll answer one particular question and a bunch of other ones. So yay. First half of the show, though, let's talk about Gene Munster, the ever-optimistic Gene Munster. Is it fair to call him ever-optimistic? Is it ever fair to call him optimistic? I think it probably is. He's a fairly optimistic guy where Apple is concerned. He has come out for the third year in a row and said that Apple is going to outperform the rest of the FAANGs. FAANGs, of course, being Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. And what's funny is this time last year, I thought it was crazy that anybody talked about FAANGs anymore. First of all, it ought to be FAN because Google is now Alphabet, and you put Netflix in there. Seriously, this time last year, I thought it was just for fun. I thought it was just a holdover because who cares about Netflix? There are so many other streaming services, and streaming, I mean, yeah, sure, it's how people watch things, but who cares how people watch things? And then we couldn't go outside anymore. And all of a sudden, oh yeah, it actually matters how people watch things. It's amazing, actually, how much he says Netflix was up this year as far as performance. Netflix is up 60% this year, driven primarily by the stay-at-home trade, he says. Now, understand when we talk about Apple outperforming the rest of the FAANGs, what he's talking about specifically is their stock performance. 2019, Apple outperformed the rest of the FAANGs with only a day left. He expects that Apple is going to have outperformed the FAANGs. Something really horrible would have to happen tomorrow, I guess, for Apple not to come out on top. And he thinks the same is going to happen for 2021. There are a few reasons that he thinks that. First of all, work from home is not going anywhere, which is to say, we're not going to work. We're working, but we're not going anywhere for it. And so the work from home thing is going to continue, he thinks. Driving the iPad still higher, driving the Mac still higher. We believe those two segments can grow at 10% plus in 2020 and 2020. I'm sorry, 2021 and 2022 compared to the flat growth in the last few years. So says Mr. Munster. He thinks that people are really going to get into this 5G thing finally. Second half of this year, he thinks, is when 5G is really going to take off. Sure. I mean, it almost doesn't matter because people are going to keep buying iPhones, assuming that there's still money for people to buy iPhones. This time next year, we'll be talking about iPhone 13 or whatever they call the next iPhone. And iPhone 12 will become the cheapest. Well, not the cheapest, because there'll probably still be an SE or a Mini or something like that out there. But the iPhone 12 will be last year's phone. The numbers that we heard yesterday from, was it Flurry Analytics? Top activated phone on Christmas Day was the iPhone 11. That is last year's phone. That is almost as good as this year's phone. Except, of course, the iPhone 12 will come with 5G automatically. That's why I say it almost doesn't matter if people get excited about 5G. 5G is going to be ubiquitous. You're going to go to get a phone, and you're not going to have the option of not getting 5G. It's just a question of which 5G phone do you want. So he says the excitement will, play into it. He says it's going to grow in the back half of the year, starting a 2 to 3 year iPhone upgrade cycle. Daniel Ives would say we're always in that at this point. I kind of agree with him. There are so many, close to 1 billion? It's 900 something million iPhones out there, right? Spread over the course of a number of years. We're pretty much always in an upgrade cycle at this point. Sure, okay, 5G is going to drive that higher. Okay, that's fine. His next point on why Apple is going to outperform is kind of funny. He thinks expectations for stock performance or for revenue performance, for this year for Apple. And when I say this year, I'm already thinking 2021. 2021, he thinks the expectation of revenue growth of 15% is spot on. He gives that a thumbs up. He's all for that. The problem that he has in 2022, the street is only expecting revenue growth of 5%, and he thinks that's far too low. But what's going to happen is, as the year goes on, people are going to look at 2022's revenue expectations and see 5% and say, well, that's just far too low. I got to get in on this action. And that's going to drive expectations for 2022 up. Basically, people looking at it going, no, that's ridiculously low. Let's go ahead and get into that. And that's going to drive up Apple shares because people are going to get excited about, the beat that they can dance to. And they'll buy Apple shares and that'll drive it up. And so that's his thing. And finally, there's the new business that Apple might get into in 2022 or later. This includes the hardware subscription that he's expecting. And of course, getting into a car at some point, whether that happens in 2024 or 2027, either way, people get excited. And so they buy the excitement. And, it's kind of funny because the stuff that he's saying, one of the things that's going to drive excitement around Apple shares next year being 2021, is stuff that won't happen until 2022 or later. But, there you go. Now, he also does break down what he thinks is going to happen with the FAANGs. He thinks they are going to fracture. And I guess we'll have to start calling them AA. No more FAANGs, because he thinks Facebook, which has grown this year, could be hurt by regulatory issues. I wonder also if Facebook will be hurt by ATT. You've heard of ATT. That's the app tracking transparency thing that Apple's going to be putting into place that Facebook is fighting tooth and nail, or fang and nail, should we say? No, we shouldn't. That was a bad joke, and I apologize. Facebook is making such a big deal about this, taking out their full page ads and saying it's not about us, it's about all these small businesses. And I think, well, whatever. I don't know if that's going to affect Facebook's bottom line. Munster doesn't mention it. It was just something that I wondered about. Netflix, he thinks the whole streaming thing is already baked in, that it's grown the way it's going to grow. He doesn't talk about this in his note, but you could also argue that with the, HBO Max coming in and with Disney Plus still coming on strong, that people might start choosing. I mean, Netflix was always just a thing you had, right? Like you used to just have cable. You had cable. Of course, you had cable. And then people started making decisions saying, well, maybe I don't need cable. What if I just have this over the top service and this over the top service? The problem now is you got 20 over the top services, half of which might actually be compelling. And at some point, you look at it and say, geez, which one am I actually watching? Which ones am I not? And start cutting. So maybe it's just baked in. Nobody else is coming on. I personally would argue they might have to actually fight for some of that money. Although maybe Netflix is so entrenched that it's really just HBO that has to fight. Maybe really it's just whatever new thing that comes on has to fight. Anyway, he thinks Netflix, I don't want to go so far as to say get left behind, but does not grow the way Apple and Amazon will. Google is also concerned about growth expectations. So that leaves Apple and Amazon sort of like leading the pack and even leaving the pack because he says that FAANGs are going to fracture. He thinks Apple does better than Amazon. And okay, sure, you can make a case. Lots of services, lots of hardware. People are still working from home. They might still need new computers. They might still need new iPads. There's the excitement around 5G. There's all that stuff. Here's what I know. People with lots of money and people with little money need things, or they think they need things anyway. They buy things, they order things. I didn't buy a single Christmas present at a store this year, not one. They all came from Amazon. Do I feel good about that? No, I don't. But I feel good about the fact that I was exposing myself less to COVID-19 or the possibility of picking up COVID-19. Vaccinations are lagging what they should be. There's a new, more virulent, there's a new, more easily spread COVID-19 variant, maybe is the best way to put it, that's out there right now. It's not necessarily more deadly, it's just easier to catch. And the old one was deadly enough. Okay, he thinks Apple's going to outperform Amazon. Great. I could see making a case for why Apple is not going to outperform Amazon. I mean, how do jobless numbers pan out? How does Washington pan out? Will Congress work towards one goal? I guess is a question that we could ask. And basically it comes down to who's going to control the Senate. And I know that sounds crazy to say that affects Apple, but it all affects everything. It's all interconnected. And to stand right now and say, we know for a fact that Apple is going to beat Amazon, I think he's right. Both of those are going to do better than the rest, or both of those stand to do better than the rest. There's a lot that goes into both of them. Amazon, it seems to me, is more well-positioned, unless Washington gets it into its head to crush Amazon somehow, which I'm not rooting for. Whatever. It's interesting. His take is interesting. Gave me a lot of stuff to think about. He actually wrote about a bunch of other stuff that he sees happening in 2021 as well. Loup Ventures, I believe. Loup Ventures is loupventures.com. I don't remember off the top of my head. I apologize. But just search for Gene Munster or go to any of the Apple blogs and you'll probably find that stuff today. I feel certain that Apple 3.0's Philip Elmer DeWitt has linked to it today as well. The whole piece is interesting. Right. So we talked about all the different ways that money can be affected for everybody. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more personally in just a moment. But this is the part of the show where I ask you to do something. And what I'm going to ask you to do is support this show. And when I say support this show, what's interesting, to me anyway, macOS Can Live, In a Few Minutes, they are all part of one big conversation in my head. I know I should think of each one as separate things. And I do think of each one as separate things, but they're all part of this holistic thing that I'm doing. And so I'm going to ask you to support those. And the way I'm asking you to support them is however you can, however you see fit, however you feel like. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, if you could hit that like button, if you could hit the subscribe button, if you're listening to the audio podcast, but you ever go to YouTube, if you could subscribe to this channel, that would be great because these will turn up. Who knows? Other stuff may turn up at some point. I even surprise myself a time or two. So if you could subscribe on YouTube and, hit the like button on YouTube, that would be fantastic. If you're subscribed to Apple Podcasts or any other podcast aggregator that has a like button or a share button, if you could hit like and you could hit share, that would be great. If you could write a review of this show, if you like it, if you could write a review of this show on iTunes, that'd be fantastic as well. And then finally, there's the nuts and bolts way of supporting, and that's Patreon. Patreon.com/macOSKen. I probably need to update that because I think all that talks about is macOS Ken. But if this show ever starts generating ad revenue, that money will go back into whatever the next project is, whatever the next thing is. Same goes for macOS Ken, same goes for everything I do. It's all, meant to turn into other stuff, bigger stuff. Probably I need to actually come up with a vision of what that looks like because mostly I think, hey, that would be fun. And I could probably make $1 or $2 off of it. And so I start doing the thing. And then 6 months, a year later, it's like, well, that's fun. Is it doing what I want it to do? But that's probably more for in a moment. Anyway, that's what I'm asking you to do. And I'm not begging for money. I'm not begging for likes. I'm saying if you like this stuff and want to support it, there are a bunch of ways that you could. And I would be super appreciative if you did. Probably the biggest one is just tell people about this stuff. Mention it on, Twitter or Facebook or wherever. Or, in conversation, if you still have those. Thanks. Shouldn't move, by the way. I found out that that's what blew out the microphone yesterday. I shouldn't even shift in my chair. Happened right before this show, so I'm going to stay stock still and have an uncomfortable conversation with you. I've had a couple of people who support me on Patreon. I've had a couple of people who support me on Patreon ask me about an ad-free feed in Patreon. And I don't really know how to read the question because my assumption is they're saying, well, that's the thing that they want. And because they're supporting me on Patreon, I want to pay attention to what they want. And what's weird is they're supporting me on Patreon financially, right? And it's not my sole means of support, but they are supporting me on Patreon financially. And so we hit this weird place where I am both incredibly appreciative and want to respond. And I don't want to talk about it because it's talking about money. And I don't like talking about money. Talking about money is incredibly uncomfortable. But a couple of times I've had people ask me, what about an ad-free version for Patreon? And I've actually spent the past week or so trying to figure out how I respond to that question. And the way I respond to that question is a few different ways. I will start with the advertisers. I don't take ads from macOS Ken that I don't, at the very least, respect. Not everything is something that I can use. There are team apps that I have tried out to see if they work, that I have tried out to see if it would be a place that I could work comfortably, right? But this is all me. This is all solo right now. And so I don't have a team with whom to work on these things. Those are the ones that probably I know the least about. Everything else, Sunbasket, Mint Mobile, Squarespace. What else? I'm having trouble thinking them off the top of my head. Headspace. I'm seriously liking Headspace. I don't do it as much as I know I should, and I've actually been examining that for the past couple of days. I think I'm reticent because I'm angry, and that's a whole other thing and another thing. Not angry at Headspace. They're actually great. More personal issues and stuff like that. I will tell you, Squarespace is no longer sponsoring Mac OS Ken. Been close to a decade. Been close to a decade. So I can't really be offended or upset. I'm super glad that they came on. I'm super glad that they supported the show as long as they did. Um, I will still recommend them to anybody who asks me. Don't tell Squarespace because, if they want to come back, I'll take their money too. But all of the advertisers on macOS are advertisers that I, at the very least, can support, and I try to make it they're ones I actually believe in. And as many ads as you hear on macOS there have been plenty that I hit the no button because I get asked about certain things, and some of them it's just like it doesn't feel like it's going to be a fit for me, or I can't support the idea, or you name it. There are a number of reasons I say no to them. So if I'm bringing you an ad, even if you are supporting me on Patreon, I'm not trying to steer you wrong, which makes me sound like a used car salesman. I won't run ads for used cars, by the way. So, why would I still not have one for Patreon people? I think to have an ad free stream, to have an ad free feed, would be advertising against my advertisers in a way. And I don't want to do that because they believe in us. They believe in the relationship that you and I have. They believe in the product that I'm putting out. They believe in whatever this thing is that you and I do. And I don't want to be like, but you don't want to listen to this crap, so pay me over here and you don't have to listen to this crap because I don't think it's crap. I don't take ads from people that I feel like are bad. And I don't want to advertise against them since they're, helping to support me. The other thing, honestly, is I'm producing 16 different episodes a week on 4 different shows. There's 1 for the checklist. There are 5 for macOS Ken. There are 5 for macOS Ken Live. And there are 5 for In a Few Minutes. I know it's been a little, off for the past week or so because of the holidays, but it's generally speaking 16 episodes a week. And to have a feed that was without the ads would jack that number to 21. It would be another thing that I'd have to remember to do in the day. Which, feels like a bit. The other thing too, though, is I don't get a raise. I don't get like a thing at the end of the day or the thing at the end of the month, at the end of the year. There's no performance review. Every day is a performance review. Every day when I either have an advertiser or I don't is whether I get a raise or I don't, or whether I can keep, doing what I'm doing or don't. I've got 3 means of support at this point. Patreon is one, advertisers are one, and the show that I produce for Secure Mac, the checklist. Advertising is the bulk of it. It's the biggest part. And so I don't want to do anything that's going to necessarily rock or upset that boat or anything like that. At the same time, there's not a single part of it. I could probably do without Patreon and be okay, but it would be really, really difficult, and I might not be able to. I might be able to do without the checklist, but it would be really difficult, and I might not actually be able to. Everything that I've got going is basically making it so that it's enough, which is why, honestly, I'm always looking for a tiny bit more because who only wants enough? Not like I think I'm going to get rich, not like I'm trying to gouge anybody, but I don't know. I will say in the house in which I live, there's not quite as much income this year as last. While I have not personally suffered financially from COVID-19, we're down in income. So anything that runs the risk of rocking the boat is difficult. So there we go. I don't ever want the ads to be burdensome. And I know people joke about it, and sometimes it even feels like they might be. And I hate that, and I apologize. Here's what I will tell you. I'm not putting anything on the show that I don't think would be beneficial to somebody. I'm principled about choosing what I choose. And hopefully I make the ads entertaining enough. And also, The other thing I will say is more ads equals more content. I've got to deal with the salespeople that I won't go 3 ads in a show. And we actually had an issue earlier this year where they had booked 3 ads in a show, and I was like, "Well, that can't happen. That can't happen because it's far too much." 2 ads, then I'm looking at the show going, "I need more content here because I can't justify taking this much of people's time without giving them the thing they showed up for in the first place." So there's that too. All makes me horribly uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm doing, but I keep trying. And so um, hopefully the people who ask me that question actually hear this answer. I'll probably put something on Twitter about it. And if it sounds like I'm crying poor mouth or anything, if it sounds like I'm begging or something like that, I'm not. I'm just examining where I am and then trying to explain to you where I am and why I do what I do the way I do. We'll check back in on December 30th, 2021 and see how it went. What do you say? So, after that, I think that's going to do it for today's show. If you're here in the chat room, please stay in the chat room. I will try not to disconnect this. I'll try to make it so that we can actually talk to each other when this is all over. If you're not here in the chat room, keep an eye on Twitter over the next day or two. I think we are doing a show on Thursday afternoon. I am not 100% certain. Keep an eye on Twitter, like I say, and I'll let you know for sure. We do, I believe, have macOS Ken tomorrow. And yeah, take care, everybody. Talk to you soon. Stuck my tongue at you again. Stuck my tongue out at you again. Haven't done that in a while. I almost don't want to read the chat room. I hate talking about all that stuff. But people kept asking. If I went off the rails, let me know. That's very kind of you, Brian. I'm going back up to the top, though, so I can see what everybody said at the first part. Stephen Huxtable. Oh, Donna's here. Donna was late, but that's okay. We've all been late a time or two. Frosty UK. Still my DJ name. Everyone wear hats if we get together tomorrow. Why do we wear hats? Is that a New Year's thing? I have a fun hat that I haven't worn on air. I've only worn one hat actually on air, so all of my hats that I haven't worn are fun, I think. Have you seen the dancing robots? Man, the dancing robots, it feels like doesn't it what are we watching at this point? Who did like movies like that? The guy who did like District 9 and Chappie. So it's like world girding pandemic, economic uncertainty. Somebody in the White House who seems to think that he might still get to be in the White House next month or the month after next, which, and then we all start watching the dancing robots. Does it not feel like either the beginning or the middle of like the start of Blade Runner? Bill says what's sad is those robots dance better than he does. Yeah, no kidding, right? That thing where they stand there with their leg in the air, I'm like, now you're seriously just showing up, Boston Dynamic Robotic, whatever. Oh, Eugene says, don't apologize about the FAANG joke just because it bites. I think it was David actually who asked about the, yeah. Hey, David. Might have been David was one of the people who asked about the ad-free thing, but we'll get to that. Sorry, Stephen says don't call the. I do know you, Stephen. How do I know you? I know you. Sorry. Don't call the COVID-19 the UK variant. Well, eh, I can't help it. I'm sorry. We can call it the Kansas flu if you want, because that's where we found, no, Colorado flu, because that's where we found it here. Although they're saying we probably had it here for a lot longer than we realize. Frank says he's only interested in 5G and laptops and desktops. See, that kind of stinks for you, Frank, because you're going to have to pay extra for that. Why don't you just get it for your phone, though, and get something like, well, I'm not doing it as an advertising thing right now, but like, why don't you tether from your phone, which is going to come with 5G, to something else? Just shop around for a good deal because 5G is coming for your phone if you ever get a new one after this. Oh, it might be a tiny bit too soon, John. I'm glad nobody was seriously hurt. Well, except for that one guy. But he did that. Where are we? Where are we? Oh, thank you guys. I'm sorry. I see everybody doing the thumbs up thing in the middle now. I'm catching up. Oh, you see? Okay. This is the part where I get embarrassed now. I've hit the part now because Paul's saying he does his best to support. I know you do. I know you do. Look, everybody here. This is the part where I said, I'm not sure I want to read what everybody is saying. Yeah, thank you, Bill. Oh, yeah. As a Brit, hearing a presenter suddenly launch into an ad is jarring. Honestly, that's why I always stop and say more news in a moment, but first this. I understand what you're saying. I've actually I listen to the BBC World Service, and it's weird to me that every one of their ads, or every one of their podcasts, excuse me, starts and says the BBC World Service is supported by advertising. And then they play like an orchestra stab, and then they play a very American ad, and then they play another orchestra stab, and then they go into the thing. That said, I understand what you're saying. What kind of ads have I rejected? Well, I can't really talk about that, John. Just occasionally I come across something that I'm not sure I agree with it on a personal level. There was a device that supposedly made everything safer for your internet. And I can't remember what it was exactly, but I thought about the guys on the checklist and how they would feel about me just introducing a random piece of hardware that all of my internet traffic goes through without my knowing anything about it. And I guess that's part of it too. Like if I can't get my head around what it is you do, then I can't in good conscience say, because like Molecule, for example, I actually read a lot about Molecule. I read a lot about that guy. I read a lot about why he did it. And I went to as many outside sources as possible, not just reading their PDF that they sent me, because that's always only going to say good things. But also, read some stuff outside of that as well. I try to get my head around what it is they do. And if somebody presents me with a black box and says, no, just plug it in, it'll be better. I can't do that in good conscience, can I? I can't ask you then to do that in good conscience. And then there are just some other things where I've just had kind of the idea doesn't sit well with me. So like that kind of thing. Frank, you're too kind. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, thank you. Do advertisers need listener information? That's a really good question, Stephen. I know that I don't have any way to get listener information unless people tell me about it. I work with a company called Backbeat Media. You've heard about them a lot. Backbeat Media is good at selling the story of my show. where I mean, and then of course, it's like everything. Like, the first one makes the second one easier, right? Assuming that there is response. Squarespace might have been my first consistent advertiser on Mac OS X under Backbeat. Um, and Squarespace was a good enough response that then Backbeat is able to go. So no, I guess the answer to your question, they don't need specific information about you, Stephen. They need specific information about how ads have worked on my show in the past. Would be the best way to put it. That said, they may be looking at things like, Twitter followers and stuff like that, but even then, they're not looking at individual Twitter followers. And let me back up. I know that is a thing that it is possible to look at. I know that there's a way to go into Twitter and theoretically get some, what's the word I'm looking for? Statistics, not statistics, but like that, some way to get like that kind of information about Twitter followers. That doesn't necessarily translate into a number of people actually listening. Doesn't necessarily translate into all that stuff. Bottom line, Stephen, no, they don't need information about specific listeners. The kinds of ads that I do are me sitting here reading. They're not the kinds of things that Rob Walsh was talking about and has spent a good part of the year talking about, as far as like ad insertion that actually tracks listeners from in various ways, which is something that's tied to the individual podcast, not tied to the podcast aggregator. So those are being served through, Apple Podcasts the same way they're being served through Overcast, the same way they're being served through everybody, because they're attached to the show itself, not to the aggregator. But that doesn't happen on Mac OS X. I couldn't find my blank with both hands in a map, so there's no way I'm tracking you, Stephen. Where are we? I got lost. Thank you, Brian. You're very kind. Your ads, as well as some others in the Apple community, never seem burdensome, as they truly come from the heart with product services that you seem to believe in. Yeah. Thanks. I mean, that's that's the hope. That's the goal. I don't want to tell you to do something that I wouldn't do, because then I'm a horrible person with questionable antecedents. Sometimes in other podcasts, I hear an injected ad twice in a row, says Stephen. That's interesting. You hear that in a different way, I think, because you're from the UK. We're used to like 3 ads in a row. I have it in my notes, actually. So I used to work for a little country station in Oklahoma called KFXI, Foxy 92. And come Christmas, you would get to play news at the top of the hour. Then it was about 4 minutes of ads. Then there was one song, maybe 2. Then there was like another 4 minutes of ads. And it was that for the full hour. Because people in that area were looking to advertise as much as they could to get as much out of Christmas sales as they could. And the owner of this station was trying to undercut a station across the town, actually about 30 miles away, but he was trying to undercut them. So they were both selling ads. They were like selling 30-second ads for maybe $5 a throw, literally $5 a throw. And so you ended up with an hour that was more advertising than it was content, music. This was before everybody had an iPod. So it was kind of ghastly, which is to say, I don't know that I would notice if I heard 2 ads back to back. Now, let me bore you. There's a traffic manager for a radio station. The one thing that they should do is make sure that you're not hearing the same voice back to back. So if you've got one guy who does your ads or one gal who does your ads, what you hopefully want is like an agency spot where somebody has actually just sent you the ad, or you've downloaded it, so you're playing something that was produced someplace else. And then you might go to a spot that's produced at the station, and then you might go back to another agency spot. There's one podcast that I listen to, one of the MSNBC podcasts, and they're obviously doing ad insertion. And they've got one guy doing voices for their ads, and they've actually started doing 2 ads per break now, but it's one guy talking for 2 minutes, and there's no production, there's no anything to sort of separate them, so you really have to be listening, but it sounds kinda ghastly because it's just one guy talking for 2 minutes, and you lose track. Hey, Laura's here. Hi, Laura. Laura said, "Hi, Ken," so I'm saying hi back to her. That's very kind of you, John. John says when he needs something that he heard me advertise, he gets in touch with me for a code. Thank you. Thanks, Eugene. Ha! Nobody types so Ken can catch up. That didn't happen. Wasn't 5G supposed to be a last mile technology, i.e., not in mobile phones, but for fast home internet? Yeah, Mike Rose actually talks about that occasionally. Problem is, I don't think the coverage is there yet for everybody, right? Ivan says, Happy New Year. Thanks for being here and doing your thing for us. Thank you very much, Ivan. I appreciate that. Happy New Year to you. And thank you for being here. David, you were one of 2 people responsible for the ad discussion. What's funny is the other one was also a David. I'm not accusing Davids of anything except for being thought provoking and asking a question that I was, well, it's a lie. I was going to say that I was more than happy to answer. I was a tiny bit uncomfortable answering it, but I think it's probably good because I want everybody to know why. And I feel bad actually that it took me so long to get back to your answer, David. As I said earlier, I don't know if you saw this part or not. Talking about the business models, talking about the money, talking about all that stuff, and kind of makes one uncomfortable. That's one of the few things I miss about having a job. Coworkers, I miss coworkers, and I miss well, I know how much I'm making in a month, unless it's more, or unless I get fired. you know. So yeah. ATP. I don't know what ATP is, but I get it. I I understand it. Hey, Mike Stanley's here. Thanks, Mike. Not every morning for the past couple of weeks, I know, but thanks, man. Hey, you never answered me. Who did you play in 1776? What was your part? Do you remember? I was Ben Franklin. Accidental Tech Podcast. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Steven says he's fine not having coworkers because he doesn't like people. I get that. Don't misunderstand. I don't miss coworkers every day. Brian says 1776 is a great musical. He watches it every 4th of July. So Mike Stanley and I were in an 8th grade production. Well, 7th and 8th graders, because we went to a school that had more than one. But we were in an 8th grade production of 1776. Wow. Really, Mike? Really? Mike says his memory isn't that good. He's thinking he was John something. Well, John wasn't a very common name around the American Revolution, so it shouldn't be hard to figure out who you were. Dude. You don't remember your lines? You don't remember your songs? I can still do parts of that. I can still do parts of that play. It's ridiculous, I know. Nothing important happened in 1776, Stephen. Don't worry about it. Ha, nothing that can't be undone. Too soon? John something. I love that. I love that. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, John says he thought the king said nothing of interest happened that day. Oh, oh, Lord. Okay. You guys are wonderful. Um, so I don't know if we're doing anything tomorrow. Maybe we'll just get together. I might have a couple of other questions to answer. There is almost no news for tomorrow. Like I might actually play the first part of today's show, just the Gene Munster stuff for tomorrow's Mac OS Can, because I don't want there to be nothing there, but there's almost no news. And I'm thinking I might actually not uh, do an actual show for tomorrow, because if I use the 3 or 4 stories that I have now, there will really be no news for next Monday when the show starts again. So yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to go. But if you guys wanna, we'll come here and hang out tomorrow. Hey, maybe I'll do that's interesting. I'm not gonna tell you right now what I might do. Yeah, we'll do something here tomorrow. We might not there might not be much in the way of a Mac OS Can tomorrow morning. There'll be something in the feed. There might not be much in the way of a Mac OS Can tomorrow morning, but we'll get together here tomorrow afternoon. So, and we'll pop champagne and eat caviar, and neither of those things are gonna happen. We'll wear hats. Of course, I won't be able to see your hat. You'll just be able to see mine. All right. Thank you, John. That's touching. All right. All of you. Too many years ago, my friend, I do remember singing that McCartney Jackson duet in the dressing room. Say, say, say. I don't remember that, but were you? No, it was me. It was Teasley. It was Smith, and it was Tripp. We did When I'm 64 for our audition to get into 1776. God, if I could get rid of like half this, I might actually be able to get somewhere. Right. Everybody, have a wonderful day. I'm going to start talking to Mike Stanley now. Send me an email, dude. We'll try to fill in each other's memories from 8th grade. The Caldwell Cavaliers. What? All right. I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.